But what we want to share with you today is some research. It was 100 senior analysts that put together information on what's required of the IT department, of the CIOs, to be successful with digital transformation. When we started tracking what we call third platform that Tony talked about yesterday, with its new technologies of cloud, of mobility, of big data analytics, and then it evolved into this digital transformation. So much of our business deals with advice to the vendor clients, and then our end user clients, our buyer clients. This is really hot, and it was hot years ago, like 5 years ago when I first joined IDC. It's absolutely exploded now. But this strategic project that I'm talking about, with these 100 senior analysts out of our 1,200 analysts involved, many of which were from the Canadian contingency, put together what it is that's going to make us successful. What do we see the people that are thriving? I'm going to use that word a lot, thriving. Statistically, we've now been able to identify them. I've worked at both Gartner and IDC, and one of the things I really like about IDC is the fact that we're not allowed to say anything unless it's be quantitatively substantiated with a survey. That was new when I first got there, and it was a challenge for me. But I love it, because the things that I'm sharing with you today are based on surveys, on findings, and you saw a lot of that information yesterday in Tony's presentation. But that's what our objective is. There's going to be 4 slides I'm going to point out that I think are very important. I will have succeeded if you walk away from this half hour with a better understanding of what are the capabilities required in order to be successful with digital transformation. It's a strategic discussion, but it's trying to help our clients, both vendor and buyers, understand the rules that have changed in this environment. I really like saying that, rules that have changed. This slide was kind of referenced yesterday in terms of a maturity curve, but this was a performance scorecard that we asked in our CIO sentiment survey about a year ago to complete. And essentially, you'll notice that the two at the end, the two most mature stages, it's simply a statement of this is where our high performers are. This is where those who are succeeding in elevating, and I'm going to share with you today some of the characteristics of that particular group of people. And basically, absolutely, we need to be creating digital transformation. I use the term DX a lot. So if I say DX, you understand what that acronym means, digital transformation. But what we really want to talk about is what are those things that are accelerating the success? And let's move on. We're going to talk about some examples right up front. The first one is Under Armour. Basically, Under Armour has invested close to $800 million in health and fitness apps. They call that connected fitness. But with these apps, they've been able to tap the health progress, the fitness progress of 180 million users. And from that data, they're learning certain things that are impacting their business. For example, they now know that the average run is 3.1 miles. I don't know how they figured it out, but the average length of their athletic shoes is 4 years. And they've made that connection, and they've become very proactive when they recognize from the app that their clients, their customers, have gone their 4 years of running based upon those averages. But the CIO makes a statement here. Connected fitness, or these apps, have become a force multiplier that takes us from a shirts and shoes company to a technology company. So again, businesses are being reinvented. That's an example of a customer transformation. They got so close with their customers that they moved on. Second example is reinvention from an information technology. I found this fascinating. It was Caterpillar. Everybody knows these big tractors that move around farm fields, but there's so much more in terms of the equipment that they sell. And basically here is that and I'm going to start up front with quoting their former CIO, Doug Oberhelman, every machine, every engine, truck, tablet, light tower, smart device, and drone are eventually going to share data on one common technology platform and speak the same language. They do not deliver anything anymore from their company that is not generating data. They have created it in such a way that it moves onto a common platform that's on-site or it can be off-site, but they're collecting that data, and from that information, their quality of their jobs have improved significantly for the behalf of their customers, but they're using that through information transformation. And the last one, which was a very interesting example, was BMW. They wanted to move away from being an automobile manufacturer. They wanted to be, and if I can remember them, a mobility company, an electric car company, and there was one other one. Anyway, that's my one time to forget something in this presentation. But basically what they have is a BMWI. It's a lot of acronyms, but it's their investment arm. They've invested in 16 startups that allow them to become more closely connected with who their customers are. And with those 16 investments, they make the statement, we aim to become the leading tech company and innovation driver in the field of mobility. They've focused on exactly how they want to transform their business model. And one of the interesting things is 4 months ago, they assembled every manager within their company. They brought them all into Hamburg, Germany, into a big airplane hangar. And it was kind of an ugly session, but he showed 2 hours of videos of interviews with industry analysts, interviews with customers that showed the displeasure in this new Series 5 BMW. It talked about their declining margins, their declining profits. But the important thing was that they had that meeting. They had this vision of transforming themselves as a company. They ran into problems and they tackled the problem head on. And it was extremely well received on the part of these people in their company that were managing and moving this transformation forward. So the next slide is one that Tony shared yesterday. It's one we use a lot, but it again reinforces the idea there's a certain set of base technologies that I referenced a minute ago that innovations have been accelerated through things like robotics and 3D printing and cognitive interfaces and augmented reality. But on top of those, we have different ways that digital transformation is occurring in our these companies' environments. We're going to talk about the middle three, the green, blue, and yellow spots today. I'm not here to talk about leadership transformation. I'm not here to talk about workforce transformation. We're going to focus on these the ways in the middle that we're talking about. But let's talk about how the rules have changed. One of the things that have really changed is capital is no longer a scarce commodity. And I didn't realize the magnitude of the abundance of money that's involved. But if you think about it, from today up until 2019, in 2 years, it's going to move to $1.7 trillion. In 3 years, it'll move to $2 trillion. It's hard to get my head around what does 1.7 trillion mean. If you think about it, in the year 2016, which just was last year, you put all of the funds, all of the money that was all of the money that was generated by the worldwide automobile industry was $1.7 trillion. Equivalent to that, next year is what we're spending as a society on digital transformation, on these new monies. And the message here is that capital is no longer scarce. Our behaviors in the past have been focused on making the most of this capital. Bain's Microtrends has identified the fact that right now we have 10 times more financial capital than worldwide gross domestic product. And I find that staggering. Again, message here, there's an abundance of capital. The rules have changed in terms of how to move forward. Second abundance has to deal with data. We're talking about from a period of 2013 to 2020, 7 years, will go up tenfold to 44 zettabytes. What's a zettabyte? Again, how do you comprehend a zettabyte? 1 zettabyte is the entire Netflix catalog multiplied by 3,000, okay? Another interesting aspect is in the year, we produce in 3 days, in 2013, what all the data that was produced in the entire year of 2006. So we have an abundance of data that's not been available for, that we're able to reach out and tap. The next thing about abundance has to do with Internet of Things, connected endpoints. We're doubling from 15 million in 2016 to 2020 being 30 million. That's doubling in a period of 4 years. But that's essentially 4 endpoints for every person that's living on the planet. And then we move into the discussion of scarcity. Basically, in the 1950s, the average S&P company was on there for 61 years. By 1980, it had dropped down to 25 years. It's now 18 years. So the bottom line is that by current churn rates, 75% of those companies that are currently in the S&P 500 will no longer be there in 10 years. The message here is the time to act is now. The rules have changed, and they're changing quickly. Let's talk about another scarcity, and that's talent. Tony covered this very nicely yesterday. But basically, we're talking about finding the right talent, acquiring the right talent, retaining the right talent, and subsequently motivating the right talent. It's a huge challenge. And again, we're not talking about that today. I just want to highlight that's a shortage. We have time and money shortage. We have abundance of data, endpoints, and money. So let's talk about this other thing more that specifically relates to IT. We have way too much creaky legacy systems in our environment. Is there anybody here that does not have too much creaky legacy systems? I see some smiles, but no hands, okay? By the way, I didn't want to move away from that slide yet. But basically, with those creaky legacy systems, we've inherited something called technical debt that has to be resolved. We end up with silos, and we're talking about those a lot, and this duplication efforts that's involved. But the effort here is that we want to do digital transformation at scale. That's the requirement, and that's the demand of IT. Tony reviewed these statistics yesterday. I just want to repeat. Think about where 66% of our companies improving, remember this is data from a very big range of companies, 66% today want to improve our customers' experience. Was that true 5 years ago, 10 years ago? 48% wanted to create a competitive advantage in our business through data. Was that true 5 years ago? 41 wanted to create new business models. Again, the rules have changed. So what does this mean? And this is one of my 4 slides I really want you to walk away thinking about. This is what we have an opportunity of, from an IT perspective, of doing. Number 1, we are having the opportunity of recommending what emergency technologies impact innovation. We're sitting in a place where we understand technologies. We not only understand the technologies, we understand what's required in order to make them successful. Other people in that organization don't fully understand that, but they do understand that I need this technology to achieve a market window. Secondly, ensure that the innovation is integrated with enterprise and systems. This is where we move into the silos discussion, and we're going to be talking about that in just a second. But then retooling the infrastructure to support the digital enterprise. The infrastructure of yesterday doesn't cut it today. Remember I talked about all these new rules of the game that are being played? We have to develop an infrastructure that's going to support that. So I think the message here is that what is it that we do? It's the fact that whatever the business is trying to do from a strategic point of view to transform their business, we have to respond to that in the concept of technologies and traditional disciplines of IT. That's the requirement now. We're no longer in a position to say, well, this is what I'm capable of doing. We have to respond to what the business is being required to do in order to survive and remain on the S&P 500, or at least remain as a viable entity. So let's get into this discussion of silos. Basically, what you have are line of business executives that know what they need to do in order to achieve a market window. They know what's required from a timing perspective. They know frequently the technologies they need to accommodate that. And so what happens is trade-offs are made, decisions are made, trade-offs are finalized. And what does that mean? It means they narrow the focus of the technology discussion down to a point where something can happen very quickly. And what naturally happens is you have silos. You have all these little projects, innovation projects that are surfacing that aren't integrated into any kind of a whole. So what is it that we're supposed to do? We're supposed to support each initiative without broader consideration, and it leads to building this forest of silos, which is what the graphic or the tree is implicating. And what do we end up with? The words say a brittle, inflexible, intractable technology portfolio that we all know from our experience is going to ultimately fail. That is not a recipe for long-term success, but that is a recipe that's happened. If you'll notice, there was a lot of talk a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, about bimodal. Basically, enlarge the number of innovations that are going on. And we started countering that with some research that talked about a 3-dimensional approach. And that new dimension was the concept of integration, integrating these innovations into the at-scale operations so that they become mission critical and dependable and reliable and secure so they can support the business functions. That's not a tendency that a line of business executive is going to take if he or she is trying to move forward on a business initiative that's going to, allow the company to survive. So another approach is needed. And what I'm suggesting here, and the rest of the presentation talks about, is the fact that we need a scalable, modular capabilities approach. And I'm using the word capabilities. Basically, from this research that I started off in talking about, one of the things that has been honed in on is that a certain set of capabilities must come from the IT organization in order for digital transformation to take place. So let's talk about what those capabilities are. And to describe that, you notice the dark blue in the middle is capabilities, but the description of that is a modular, scalable, it's a plug-and-play portfolio of architected components that industrialize and scale to deliver the technology that's required for the business purposes. And you know what? That plug-and-play environment is different for every single person in this room. A vendor is not going to be able to walk in and say, this is what you need to solve all of your problems, which was true in the second platform that was based on distributed computing components. It's focused on what the business requires. And so consequently, each one of you in this room is going to have to develop a unique set of capabilities to respond to that business requirement. And so this is the graphic that we'll be coming back to. Basically, when we talk about capabilities that are needed, this is what I'm talking about. It's talking about the IT platforms, the databases, the applications, the technologies that are required in order to move forward. That's a set of capabilities that we know what to do with that. I mean, that's a discussion that we're familiar with. Secondly, it's the processes. It's the activities, the procedures, the data sets, the resources. It's the things that we've grown up with, the things that IT is notorious for. Maybe we haven't handled them right, but we're aware that they're needed and required. The second set of capabilities is governance. It's the concepts of responsibility and accountability, of organizational change, of KPIs that are needed in order to accommodate the governance. This is the part, and last night I mentioned in the panel discussion, the change that started happening about 2 years ago when the line of business spending on technology as a percentage of the spend started to decrease after years of going up very rapidly. And why did it decrease? It's because of the governance and the processes that IT does well, they begin to recognize the need for. And lastly, the talents. We've already talked about that set of skills, knowledge, work styles, and talent sourcing. So let's go into that, and the rest of the discussion will be about these 3 strategic priorities, the first one of which is experimental engagement. Basically, blending the digital and physical into commuter space. Let's talk about what IDC was focusing on, something called omni-channel. It's this ability to connect with whatever way the customer wanted to connect within their physical world. And there were different methods of shopping that were available, and we wanted to try to make sure that we were connected into all of those, quote, omni-channel experiences. But the new discussion is about experimental engagement. It's blending this physical and digital in engagement. But to do that, we have to understand how our technology that we are using and what our company is trying to accomplish fits in with life activities. For example, in this resting thing, 43% of health and fitness band users track their sleep at night. I was like, I don't do that. That was like new information for me. Who wants to track their sleep at night? But apparently 43% of those people that have those bands do. Let's talk about leisure entertainment. Now, this is being confirmed with the absolute implosion of the cable industry that's going on. But 12% are looking to and get their entertainment through online streaming. And then dining and shopping. This was amazing to me. 34% of consumers are willing to share their personal information. Why? In order to get a discount. And are people taking advantage of that? Are companies taking advantage of that? But anyway, the challenge here is in this quote from Tom Brenner. Remember I talked about BMW? They have a vice president of digital life. And his responsibility is to take these life activities and figure out how they as a company can better connect with them and accommodate them. We are really focused on how we can integrate our offerings smoothly and seamlessly into the digital life of our customers. So the example here is Macy's, which is a very large retailer in the States. But basically they have something called On-Com Mobile, and I use this in Home Depot. I walk in there, I have ceased asking, what do you call them? I don't want to say agent, whatever the floor person is, where something is. And then they send me to the wrong aisle. When I suddenly realized that they were accessing a mobile application, I can now go into my Home Depot app and I can find the aisle and the bin of anything that I want. And I'm using that myself. They've taken it a step farther. When somebody requests the special product or the department or the brand that they're looking for, they initiate an interactive conversation to customize that customer's experience to what it is that they do. And they're doing that through the use of some artificial intelligence. But basically, again, we go back to this graphic. And here's this, again, the second slide that I'm talking about. Here's a set of capabilities. The challenge here and the opportunity for IT is to pick out which one of these I'm going to take and manage and optimize and then repackage and reuse for another application. This is, I think, a worthy slide to take home and begin to ask, what are the capabilities that I'm offering my business customers in terms of what it is that I can do to step up and provide them with the capabilities that are necessary for their business transformation. So let's move on to the second example, which was data monetization. And basically here, data was seen as a competitive advantage. And what we want to move to is being able to leverage data to create new revenue streams. Think of data in somewhat of a context of like an oil distributor. If we were in Alberta, this would be probably more common to the people there, but it's where you take raw data and various forms of value, added content, and it's bought and sold through bilateral transaction through data brokers. And basically what I'm talking about here is upstream. Remember, I tried to create an analogy with the oil environment. But you locate, identify, and acquire continuous streams of information asset in your enterprise, and then you turn around and you refine that data and enhance the value of it by aggregating it. And eventually, downstream, you distribute that data through real-time control systems and channels such as industry clouds. That's the new way that data is being used in this, quote, new data economy. Example here of a two-step approach is Schindler Elevator. Basically, they put sensors in all of their lifts, all of their elevators. And from that, a facilities manager, and I'm saying this for the benefit of Brian, but all of these facility managers were able to turn around and understand immediately when that elevator was starting to experience something. Signals and sensors would alert them. From that, they would be able to call through their apps a Schindler specialist that would be closest physically to them to respond. That specialist would then be able to turn around and from his app go into the data that's associated with that elevator, understand what's wrong, what spare parts are needed, subsequently order them, and which assists in their inventory management. The end result is the fact that they were able to turn around and reduce their average repair time from 23 hours to 3 hours. That's significant competitive advantage in moving forward. The more important part of that is they turned around and started selling that data, that content to the facility managers to allow them to use that in their SLAs, which is their relationship with their tenants. And they created a new revenue stream that was not there previously. So again, we move into our typical diagram. We call up that particular set of capabilities, and that, again, we're tapping into a different set of capabilities in order to respond to that opportunity for data monetization. But there again, a certain set of digital transformation capabilities that are available from the IT department who knows how to govern them, who knows how to use the processes, the technologies that are involved to manage, optimize them, recombine them in a unique way. And our last examples deals with digital business at scale. Basically, the message here is the fact that we're moving from a digital business perspective to a digital business at scale perspective. And what do we mean by that? This is where we talk about scale and speed and quality that's going to be achieved with digital business operations. And let's talk about the democratized innovation, the speed of innovation that processes such as ideation campaigns, expert networks, kickstarting like funding. I have to share an example that Rooney Dialis on our trip up, we were talking about, and she brought up an example of the Toronto Transit Commission. I think I'm saying that right. She's nodding her head, yes, so I got the commission right. I kept trying to say company. But basically, they had all this data associated with their environment, but they didn't have the resources to do it. They have now made it public, and their writers are looking through this data, trying to figure out how to leverage the Toronto Transit information in such a way that they're enhancing their commute into work. They've tapped, this is similar to crowdsourcing, ideation campaign, but I think it was a very creative way to increase the speed of innovation with data that was existing. It was a great example, and I kind of got excited when she told me about that example, because that's from an IT department that is, does not necessarily have the talent or the money to move forward. Let's talk about automated decision-making to improve quality. This is where we're talking about things like robotics and cognitive interfaces that augment the support workers in all of their aspects. And then autonomous operations to reduce costs. These are those efficiencies that come from self-healing, self-optimized, self-organizing systems. And the example here blew me away. A few weeks ago, I get a thing in our mail from the U.S. Postal Service, which is notorious for slow-moving snails. But what I got in the mail was an opportunity to enroll in something that they called, I didn't have it, informed delivery. Basically, every morning I could, from an app, call up and find out what mail. They photograph the mail that's coming into my mailbox that day. I could find out what's being delivered, when it's going to be delivered. And I'm sitting there thinking, if the U.S. Postal Service can do this, there is hope for all of us in terms of moving forward. But basically, again, we're back to the scale and the discussion. And we're talking about, again, a certain set of capabilities that you figure out which ones you're going to manage, which ones you're going to optimize, you recombine them, reuse them, and the next project you might be doing a different set, but it's this set of capabilities. I want so badly to communicate to you to step back and realize that what you're offering to your organizations for business transformation is a set of capabilities that will allow them to more effectively meet their market windows with the technologies that they want to leverage, but do it in such a way that you're not creating these inflexible, brittle silos in your environment. So 3 platforms you need to begin developing. Again, it's going to be different for each one of us. Each one of us is going to start from a different place, but I think the capabilities are going to be consistent among us. It's experimental engagement platforms, again, for this customer transformation, the data monetization, the digital business capability monetization. And with that, I'm finished. If there's any questions, I was running through that in order to try to get it done in 30 minutes. But if there's any questions or comments before we begin the next segment, that would be great. Yes?
Most of the IT department act as a customer, not as a profit center. So how do you monetize it?
So you're talking about the fact that in your environment, there's not profit centers, there's a different kind of customer. So data monetization may not be reflective, but I was using the example of that Toronto Transit. That was not a for-profit, but they were actually enhancing the experience of their constituents by tapping into that data. There's just different ways of looking at the same situation. That was a customer engagement. It wasn't for monetization profit, but it's the same thing. Does that help?